funding the commons. It's not just another tech conference, and it's not another bunch of crypto dudes conference. When you use the word commons, you implicitly talking about caring for our shared resources. And if that's not explicit, it should be made explicit. My name is Navroop Sahdev, and I run an organization called the Digital Economist. We're based out of Washington, D.C., and we are a think and do tank. I kind of call myself a black sheep economist because I studied, research, taught in many ways, not as a professor, but in other capacities, economics, which was sort of the traditional neoclassical, if you may, for the lack of a better term. And I kind of put that away, and I said, well, this doesn't make sense. It's too reductionist, and life is obviously more complex and more wholesome, and there's so much more, and there's interdependencies. And so when I was learning about this work on, complexity science, network theory, as kind of my journey evolved and unfolded, I also realized that this stuff is not really new. I mean, if you pick up the Vedas 5,000 years ago, they talk about this, wholesomeness, this wholeness, this interconnectedness and interdependencies, and that's really the core premise of a lot of the work. I mean, we created these silos in order to aggregate knowledge, right? Because you cannot be a doctor and a president, an economist and an artist and all of those things at once. You have to choose. But that doesn't mean that, there's only one way to do things, or there's only one version of reality in that way, which is true to that discipline. So in many ways, economics is a very imperfect science because we use the tools of natural sciences, randomized controlled trials, etc. But then we deal with a lot of very human things, irrational behavior, other motivations, than to just optimize utility. So it's really hard to I think account for all of these and still sort of call yourself like a classical economist. I don't know if that's something that could be justified by a lot of intelligent and informed professionals for a very long time. For me, I think that realization came fairly early on. I was 25 years old, and I said, this doesn't make sense. We have to figure things out. There have to be other answers. Funding the Commons, which is bring together really a very interesting and eclectic group of experts, various domains touching Web3, blockchain, AI, to move the needle forward in how we fund the commons, which is again, digital commons specifically in this case, but not only, also the physical commons, common pooled resources. We need to find mechanisms to expand the space of, commons. And so in that sense, I think sort of the theme that the conference brought together people on is really spot on. We recognize we're not sort of fooling ourselves by saying that, oh, this is great and it's all going to be good, but I heard a lot of concerned scientists and experts in the room as well who are focused on tangible pathways and smart ways to fund, the common pool resources and those who are building those resources. So I think that's really, both practical as well as keeps the focus on where it needs to be. I learned about the term commons. I was in a class in Paris, learned about all things IP, economics of IP, law management, and how open source has been the backbone of the global digital economy. But really the idea comes from physical commons, which is taking care of physical environments, right? So an example of a local common would be something like a lake or a forest or, fisheries, etc. So traditionally there's, a body of literature in economics on what is called the tragedy of the commons. And the idea is that if it's a shared resource and everybody just optimizes for self-interest, which is what a lot of economics relies on, it leads to overexploitation of resources, and this is very well known. But the later scholars went on to do this amazing work on how can we actually govern these common pool resources to not lead to tragedy of the commons. Very quickly, there's a subset on digital commons, examples, Wikipedia, the internet. These are distributed, decentralized systems that emerge, on sort of like a common, in a polycentric, which means there's no one clear center, way. And 10 years in, I mean, I discovered blockchain technology in 2016, and I just thought it was like the most perfect way to govern commons effectively, to ensure that we actually have a technological backbone as well as a mechanism to effectively regulate and govern our common pool resources. I think one of the first challenges is when you're looking at stewardship, which is kind of the core premise of this work as well. Do we actually have enough conscious individuals who are keen to focus on that aspect, right? And I think that gives me hope on sort of being in funding the commons and being in spaces where other like-minded individuals are there. But I think a lot of the times, in sort of a lot of professional spaces, we see this race to just focus on the bottom line, and I don't think that serves the larger whole, the intricacies of the socioeconomic structures we have, the care we must have for each other as individuals, as economic beings as well, and that has direct implications for what it means for policy, what it means for what we choose as priorities of not just ours as societies, but also as a global economy. We've launched something called the Ostrom Project here with Funding the Commons and Earth Commons. It's a vision for a shared planetary ecosystem where technology serves a role to allow us to be good stewards of our physical resources and also digital resources. And so it kind of, the vision of the project is, think of like a loom, like a universal global abstract idea of a loom, and all the actions and all the innovations kind of become these threads that go into it. So there's the idea of weaving. We think of this and imagine this as a shared loom where all of our actions kind of intertwine and contribute to this larger whole. And this larger whole is, in fact, weaving this shared future that we want to see. For us, the Ostrom Project is, on one hand carrying forward the legacy of Elinor Ostrom, which personally I think from a purely economic science perspective there's a lot there that's unexplored, but also taking those principles that are already been established to build better futures. And I really think we stand on the shoulders of the giants, and a lot of us, a lot of our, people in our generation particularly feel kind of a disconnect in many ways, but also a sense that, okay, we are innovating and we're using technology, and probably the older generation doesn't know too much. But I think that's not quite true. What is true that there is, the challenges we face have been around before, even if the nature of those challenges keeps emerging, and as we call, like an emergent property of the system. But at the same time, we also have a lot of the wisdom that we can apply to our current day and age, and how to be better stewards of the planet, and that's really what the project is focused on.